few little tweaks make a big difference. iQOO 11 in the Gadget Lab. The manufacturer sent this my way for me to take on a test drive and share my thoughts. The end of 2022 got a little weird through Techtober, and I had grander plans to dig into the 9T a little bit more. But the conversation for iQOO continues with the iQOO 11. Immediately at the top of this video, the concern I have for brands like this is overcomplicating their product releases, because there's a lot of this in this, but this is better than this. I'm totally getting ahead of myself. The iQOO 11 is a hot rod phone in the premium tier. It continues the tradition of partnering with BMW M Motorsports, and I have to point out again, there is no BMW wallpaper on this phone, and it's maybe kind of funny that there are some other automobile manufacturers who will make an appearance on your lock screen. Now, this does feel like a step up from the 9T. A T-series phone can sometimes feel more like a flagship killer. The 11 is built a little nicer than that. First, just in terms of build quality, it comes with the vegan leather back. Just nice to have a phone in this range without a glass back. It's soft and grippy, and I really don't want to put a case on it, but I probably should just to keep it looking nice, and there is a clear bumper included in the box. Now, next, the screen is kind of interesting. This is a great OLED, and it's not curved. This is a flat front face, but unlike the 9T, it's a higher resolution and even higher refresh rate. So this is 1440p at 144 Hertz. That's kind of unique right there, because there aren't many phones higher than 1080p resolution with high refresh screens and without curved glass. It's this or a Sony as far as I can remember, so please clue me in on any phones I might be missing while you hit that subscribe and bell icon on your way down to the comments. It's a gorgeous display, and iQOO is putting a lot of marketing into this new panel. Sticking with the display, I also want to point out this is an optical fingerprint sensor. It's not the huge max ultrasonic sensor that we found on the iQOO 9 Pro. iQOO is calling this the 11. It's not the 11 Pro, so I get it. Totally get it. But I was kind of spoiled by that ultrasonic sensor. The cameras, which we will chat about more later on in the video, are closer in performance to the 9T than the 9 Pro, but like the 9T, we do get a photo co-processor. The new V2 co-processor is a premium feature to include on a phone. And then the rest of the internals, we get a great detailed haptic motor. I'm always stoked to see an IR blaster included, so you can use your phone as a universal remote. The speakers are really good. I mean, we're at premium phone tier, and we're just shy of really good gaming phone speakers. That sounds pretty good. The model I'm reviewing has 16 gigabits of RAM with 256 gig of storage and the brand spanking new chip from Qualcomm, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. This is not a flagship killer. This is a premium tier phone. It's built really nice. It feels really nice, and it performs really well. With all of this amazing hardware and performance and display and all the stuff that's in this phone, let's take a second to talk about the UI. Let's talk about the skin. We're running Android 13 with the Fun Touch overlay. Now, we just recently took a spin with the OnePlus Android 13 update, and that's really pretty. OnePlus's new animation engine is super sleek. Fun Touch is a more modest skin. For it being called Fun Touch, it's really not that fun. It feels a lot like a sleeker offshoot of Android 11, which I know a few folks who would probably prefer that. I mean, some nice little tweaks to things like split screens and multitasking. You get a nicer menu to scroll through at the bottom for your second app. Lots of little toggles in your notifications, but I still don't see support for some Android features like live caption. That's just something that's always been missing from Vivo and iQOO phones. But there are tons of usage and customization options, often very simply delivered, like audio modes. iQOO still gives you a headphone dongle in the box, and there are tuning and hearing test customization settings to play with. No fancy name branding on it though, no Dolby or DTS, but there's a lot you can do in there, and the phone will do a reasonably good job of sprucing up compressed audio. You have tons of control over animations and unlocking, but the menus for those settings are really plain. Maybe it's simple almost to a fault, where consumers just looking at a list of text settings might not be encouraged to dig much deeper. I think that's kind of a shame, as I still feel it's a significant perk of being on Android that you can make your phone your phone. But that totally brings us to performance. It's what you're here to talk about, right? Because we're talking enthusiasts, and I think we're all in for a treat this year. We're test driving one of the first phones with a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, and it's good. All right, now we got a taste of this refinement with the 8 Plus Gen 1 late this year. To start off, the 8 Gen 1 was a powerhouse, but it was really power thirsty. The 8 Plus Gen 1 reined in some of that power draw, and it seems like Qualcomm is refining further. This is not revolution compared to the 8 Plus, but it's a sizable improvement over the 8 Gen 1. Okay, now, I still don't believe synthetic benchmarks tell you much about real-world performance. Beyond just CPU and GPU power, the entire SoC contributes to real-world app performance. I think it's fun to illustrate these differences by looking at a couple different phones. Let's take the Xiaomi 12S Ultra with an 8 Plus Gen 1 and a Pixel 7 Pro with a Tensor 2 SoC. Now, I run a whole series of real-world apps, and I time the completion of specific tasks. My toughest test is running a huge stack of raw files through the batch processing on PhotoMate R3. As expected, there's about a 10% improvement over the Xiaomi, and the iQOO is about 20% faster than the Pixel. But that's a far cry from the Geekbench score, which shows a 40% higher performance advantage. The only test I run that shows anything similar to the Geekbench differences would be RAR file compression, where there's almost a 50% advantage for the iQOO. So congratulations! If you bought a phone looking at Geekbench scores, you get to make all the RAR files you can the fastest ever. RAR! All right, my audio podcast tests were in margin of error territory for mixing audio between the Xiaomi and the iQOO. There's about a 15% lead over the Pixel 7. But then, something fun happens when we start rendering video. The Pixel 7 Pro has no issues beating the Xiaomi 12S Ultra over every test I run now in LumaFusion, and often by a sizable margin. The iQOO almost closes that gap. It's really close, but the Pixel consistently pulls ahead of Qualcomm's latest and greatest. LumaFusion really seems to like the Tensor 2. So it's never as cut and dry as one synthetic benchmark score. You'll rarely find those apps which truly realize the performance differences described by testing apps like Geekbench or N22. And those aggregate scores can often misrepresent real-world app performance. I gotta tell you, I'm so excited for this year and getting to play with this. The iQOO is the real deal. It's crazy powerful and works in a better battery draw and thermal envelope than the 8 Gen 1 or the 8 Plus Gen 1. Now, it's a little trickier getting a handle on the GPU performance. There's still a bit of game management happening. BBK phones tend to sort of lock in certain frame rates, but it's not as tightly controlled as the iQOO 9 Pro was. This has a 144 Hz screen, but no built-in FPS monitor, so we're stuck with the Android developer options for screen refresh, and that only changes in blocks of 30 FPS, so a lot of games are just hard locked to 60 FPS. There are a few racers and platformers that will open that up to higher frame rates, but some of my favorite twin-stick shooters are just capped, where we've seen them play at faster frame rates on proper gaming phones. I'll have to leave the more granular gaming testing and power draw testing to people with those crazy GPU trackers, but right now, we have a high watermark. The 8 Gen 2 is plenty capable of keeping a 60 frames per second in almost all the titles I play, and it really only seems to slip when I do absolutely silly things to the graphics settings. This is really early testing on really early software, but we keep a better sustained frame rate than we could with last gen chips. And depending on what you really like to do with your phone, this is one of the areas Google has no answer to this type of graphics processing. It's my random guess, my unlearned hypothesis, that This generation of chip will likely hang with iPhones in performance per watt, and we might see some victories on the Qualcomm side depending on which games are being tested. And this is one of the reasons why I don't really lean on Genshin for my reviews, because we know it's likely better optimized for iOS. And yet, the 8 Plus Gen 1 was neck and neck with the Apple A16 in performance per watt in many showdowns. And in my early testing, this is performing better than the 8 Plus Gen 1. So let's not keep regurgitating Apple marketing slides touting performance dominance for iPhones. Android competition got real good at the end of this year, and a lot of techies missed it. Getting to play with this now and having done some recent coverage across the semiconductor industry, the chip that might eke out some wins against the 8 Gen 2 might be coming from MediaTek, the Dimensity 9200, but I seriously doubt it's going to be capable of across-the-board wins. Any advantage will be highly game-dependent. The Dimensity 9000 was hanging with the Apple A15 remarkably well at the beginning of 2022. I have every expectation we'll see solid refinement from MediaTek also, but I digress. I'm gonna have to save the rest of that conversation for another video. The iQOO performance is also reflected in the cameras. Now, the main sensor is good. It's very good in most shooting situations. The ultra-wide camera is okay, and the portrait camera is solid. It's flattering for portraits. It's why it's on the phone. Now, the huge perk is the new V2 co-processor. What iQOO and Vivo are doing with image processing is really exciting. Our phones now process a ton of information for every shot, finishing off all of that HDR, stacking a bunch of RAW files. A Pixel is still probably the champ for point and shoot HDR, but it fills a shot buffer really fast. It only takes a handful of shots before the Pixel grays out your shutter and you have to kind of wait for the phone to catch up. The Vivo will cycle through shots much faster, and you have a lot less downtime if you're capturing multiple shots back to back to back to back to back. On top of that, the low light photography is mind-blowing. One of my more challenging night scenes, the Vivo captures the shot twice as fast as the Pixel 7 Pro. That's a big deal. For a night shot, you won't have to hold still as long. It's more likely your photo will be sharper, and the Vivo shot is just as bright as the Pixels. I'd say there's even slightly better detail retained in those sections of highlights that are often blown out. This is a significant processing advantage because the main camera sensors are not equal. The Pixel 7 Pro has a larger main sensor, which should be better at gathering more light per second, yet the iQOO takes a noticeable speed in capture and processing time. It's just a great all-around shooter. The main sensor is a ton of fun to snap photos with. We get a pretty 4K video at up to 60 frames per second. It's just really fun. The ultra-wide is kind of weak. There's no way around that. It's lower resolution, no autofocus, only 1080p video. You might use it for some landscapes, but it's one of the few areas of the phone that does not quite match the fit and finish of the whole rest of the phone. And that portrait sensor is handy in good light. Not just for the background blur portrait mode, it's just a nice flattering view. It's roughly equivalent to a 50mm lens. That's a good look for stills, but it is a smaller sensor, so it's best used in good light. But we're talking about trying to make flattering portraits, so you'd probably want good light for those anyway. iQOOs don't carry quite the same camera cachet as the more upscale Vivo X series phones, but this is a plenty capable and fun camera to use from that main sensor. Lastly, just kind of overall phone performance. I can't really comment as directly on the total phone use of the iQOO, as I'm not getting 5G with this here, but battery life is very well behaved for having a top-tier chip. We're not having to balance the compromises as much as we did the beginning of 2022, and we can use this horsepower a little more, a little longer when we're out in the field. That shouldn't be a terrific concern for most consumers though, as this phone charges silly fast thanks to the included charger. I know some folks are going to be bummed out that there doesn't seem to be wireless charging on tap, but when literally a couple minutes plugged in is all you need to run for a full day, you really lose that looking for a charger anxiety. And for a first look, that's about where we can start wrapping this all up. I've been using the iQOO 11. There's certainly room here to make a pro. We could spruce up the companion camera sensors. We could add video output to the USB port. Wireless charging would be nice for folks out there. There's room to take this and move up the food chain for price. But what we have here is a monster of a mainstream premium phone, built very well to go head-to-head with iPhone 14s and Galaxy S23s. iQOO kind of beaten Samsung to the punch on a lot of really nice gadget features, and is in a little pocket of a sweet spot. It's building on what made the iQOO 90 such a nice mid-year refresh. There are going to be some slight differences in color options, a few little specs getting tweaked, and of course pricing is going to be different for different regions, but for a non-pro phone, this is awesome. It's really fun starting off with high performance solutions, and I think we're gonna see some exciting pocket computers this year. Now, I'll definitely have more to say about the iQOO 11 specifically, and I'm gonna be using it to kickstart all of my testing for 2023. I'll be sharing those benchmarking charts on the Patreon, patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy, and we'll chat a bit more on gaming with the 8 Gen 2, some controller accessories, audio accessories. It's gonna be a lot of fun. So, as always, thanks so much for watching, for sharing these videos, subscribing to the channel. All of the support lately has been absolutely phenomenal. We're gearing up for the holiday season, and you all have been incredibly generous with checking out the website, SomeGadgetGuy.com, sharing links, and of course, all of the list of names scrolling by on your screen from my Patreon. Again, patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. This list is basically the coolest collection of tech nerds in the universe. So I hope you'll check them out. Now, you know where you can find me around the rest of the internet at SomeGadgetGuy on the Twitters and the Twitch, not so much on the Facebooks or the Instagrams. I'll be sharing some photos to Flickr. How about? It's great. And I will catch you all on the next video.